And we begin with China's struggling property market and the risk it poses to economies around the world. A new report by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development suggesting that economies from Europe to Asia, the region in which the bank is active, could see a slowdown due to China. The bank is forecasting a return to higher economic growth in 2024 in the region, following the current period of high energy prices and inflation. China's construction boom was fueled in part by growing household debt. With many Chinese now tightening their belts, imports in the nation are weakening. Beata Javorcik is chief economist for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Beata, welcome back to the show. This region stretches from Central Europe to Central Asia. I want to begin by asking, how important is trade with China for these economies?
Well, these economies, just like the rest of the world, import a lot from China. Central Asian countries also export commodities to China. But a notable development is related to Russia. As European and American exports to Russia dropped dramatically after the war started, China has stepped in and increased its sales to Russia. In particular, it is replacing some of the products that are subject to European sanctions.
I want to come back to that in just a moment, but I want to go back to China and ask, the property crisis that we've been seeing for more than a year now, what does it mean for this region?
Well, the question everybody is asking is whether this property crisis will translate into lower growth structurally. So are we going to see slower growth in China in the years to come? And if that's the case, that means lower demand for commodities exported by Central Asian countries. But also it will have impact on all other economies through the Chinese demand for oil, which translates into higher or lower oil prices.
Your report also notes that more countries are importing goods from China in the Chinese currency, the Yuan. Why is that significant?
So in our study that we have just published today, we analyze the currencies that are used in Russian imports. And what's very notable is that while a few years ago, only about 10% of Chinese exports to Russia were denominated in Yuan, by now, it's almost 2/3 of Chinese exports. Moreover, third countries are denominating their exports to Russia in Chinese currency. That's a new development. So if you think about the dominance of the US dollar, it has made it easier to impose sanctions on Russia. But the fact that sanctions have cut off Russia from the SWIFT system means that in the long term, there may be the erosion of this dominance of the US dollar as countries are turning to other currencies.
This geopolitical tussle, whether it's over the dollar or specific trade partners, that has to be very important for this region, I would imagine. There was one part of your report where you talk about the significance of Europe's competition with China when it comes to EV cars, having an effect on Slovakia and Hungary, I would imagine. Are we going to see this area be more and more affected as these two sort of poles have more competition with one another?
Central Europe is very dependent on the automotive industry. Slovakia is the largest producer of cars in per capita terms in the world. So these countries will now have to make a switch from producing combustion engine cars to producing electric vehicles. And for that, what's needed is access to critical minerals. And a lot of these critical minerals, production and reserves, are controlled by China. And what we saw in the last few years is an increase in restrictions, export restrictions on critical minerals. Globally, 30% of exports of such minerals are under some restrictions.
You're also forecasting the Russian economy will grow in 2024. Does that mean that things are looking better there for the country and for normal households?
Russia has been sanction-proofing its economy since 2014, prioritizing macroeconomic stability over growth. That means that the standard of living of households has gone down. But Russia still has been able to draw a lot of revenue from its exports of hydrocarbons. And I think we have overestimated how effective the price cap will be. A recent study by the Kiev School of Economics shows that a lot of shipments of Russian oil are priced above the price cap.
So you would say that we're also seeing, for example, in India, that Russia is selling at a deep rebate. But you would say that regardless, the price cap that Western nations have put on Russia is not especially effective or not as effective as many nations imagined it would be.
That seems to be the case, and that is because not every country is part of the sanction coalition. And as I mentioned, the recent study has shown that a lot of shipments of Russian oil are not using Western insurance, and therefore they are not bound by the price cap.
All right, that's Beata Javorcik. She's the chief economist for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Beata, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Chinese telecom giant Huawei remained silent on the processor powering its new smartphone during a high-profile event on Monday. And despite rampant speculation, it's an advanced chip capable of 5G. The phone, the Mate 60 Pro, has become a symbol of the tech rivalry between the U.S. and China since its release several weeks ago. Its remarkable download speeds indicate it has an advanced semiconductor chip inside. Tech insiders hope that Huawei would give a few more details on the specs during an unrelated product launch on Monday. Over to Zhou Zhanghan in our Taipei bureau. Zhou, Huawei promised this big leap in the chip design for its new smartphone, but since that announcement, it's been very quiet. What's going on?
Yeah, Stephen, it's pretty weird, right? There were more than hundreds of media outlets streamed the Huawei's press conference online with 98 million viewers watching it, but there was no mention about its new phone or the new chip. It disappointed many people, but it's not a surprise that Huawei is still trying to stay out of the limelight because there are still discussions about how this Chinese company bypassed U.S. sanctions to acquire cutting-edge technology to innovate its way out of these constraints. And Washington may come up with more sanctions in the future. At the same time, Huawei's progress may be short-lived because China cannot produce advanced chips on the large scale without the new technology like the TSMCs. So being low-key is probably the best way for Huawei to do right now.
Help us exactly understand what is so unusual about this chip.
Well, as I said, the chip used in Huawei's new phone involves technology that the U.S. wants to block China from acquiring through sanctions. Huawei, of course, doesn't want to talk about the details. We have to know SMIC, which produced the chip for Huawei this time, used to make only 14 nanometer chips. And this time they are able to supply 7 nanometer chips, which is a mission impossible without anyone leaking advanced technology and semiconductor equipment. There are rumors that the new chip may be a copy of TSMC's, suggesting that the technology leak came from Taiwan, or the supplier of the equipment to make the chip is the Dutch company ASML. So it's not certain if there was a problem with the US controls. So all these discussions make the chip very unusual.
So where can we expect to see this go in the coming months?
Well, 3 weeks after Huawei launched its new phone, iPhone 15 was launched in China. The competition between the two is heating up right now. Apple has clearly won the first round in its battle without Huawei. If you look at the sales rank, but we have to wait until the next quarter or even a year before we have the sales figures to decide who the winner is. And Huawei's next step in the global technology race is to not only make cell phones, but to build a solid computer power and the speed to satisfy diverse AI arithmetic needs in various industries. Huawei is ready to go into areas including smart car plus family, business, and the future of the entire environment of the digital system. It wants to connect them all, and we'll see if they can make it.
All right, so Zhanghan in Taipei, thank you.